So this is a replacement video for the video interview we were going to have on Hobby. Amy, she came in earlier. She blasted me quite heavily on Facebook, so I invited her to have the conversation. She came in earlier, but she didn't want the conversation to be on video, which I mean that's fine. If anyone wants to have the conversation on video, that's fine. If we want to have a bigger meeting, that's fine. If we want to have more meetings, that's completely fine. All of those things are completely fine. But basically, we talked through the situation, and it's a bad situation, right? So the Hobby thing was going on 4 years before I came into office. When I came into office, there was a court order to remove his stuff from his land, assuming that stuff was not going to go well. I tried to de-escalate the situation. Conversations with Hobby and Covington Keith didn't go well. At first, nevertheless, made an amendment to the court order passed through the board to give him time to either build, to pull his permits and stuff, and then to build if he did that on time. And then had Hobby's agreement that if he wasn't able to make those timeframes, he was going to move to other property that he had out in Walker somewhere. And so obviously, Hobby's MO, as I've talked about, I think briefings like this and multiple public meetings and all that type of stuff is to lie and threaten, right? Just like if he's talking, he's either probably doing one or the other, right? Lying or threatening. And so obviously all of that passed. I talked to him that it's going to go poorly for him and myself if he either doesn't meet those timelines or he doesn't do what he says and go somewhere else. And there's a bunch of details. If anyone wants to go over it, we can have all the meetings you want. And so he didn't meet all those. The court order was back in effect. I checked with the lawyer, and it was. And so got the idea of having a record company go out there, escorted by the sheriffs, of course, because there was word about it being booby trapped, and he obviously has threatened to kill a bunch of people and shoot people coming on his land and all of that type of stuff. And the sheriff had recommended, because I was updating him on stuff eventually after Hobby had threatened me a bunch of times over those first couple of years, recommended that I turn it in to the prosecutor, which I did. They did a jury trial on it. Nothing came of it. So I think that was kind of the sheriff and the prosecutor's plan to try to go about it in a reasonable way. But the sheriff didn't want to escort the record company out there because it could be a more intense situation, so he wanted the state police to do it. I put in a request with the state. They initially responded with no, then we thought about it. I believe they had some meetings on it, and then also decided no because it's an ordinance thing. So essentially, it's a law that's too low for the state police to want to do something with it. And so ended up with, right, we don't have a police department at the township. And I don't think it'd be unreasonable for the township to start one. And if the township had no issues, I never would have taken this position for one. But then I think that would be very reasonable to tackle, or even light issues, right? But with a $2 million gap on the sewer fund coming in, many ordinances that I wanted to work on changing, those types of things, the crazy amount of turnover and trying to do reforms at the township, adding full-time fire, which I think is reasonable because we don't want to have to drop doing some of the medical calls and things like that. But tackling all of that, obviously, I don't think it'd be reasonable at this time to attempt to start a police department as well. We'd have to ask for millages on taxes, so an increase in taxes that I don't think the people would overall support, even though I think having a local police force would be reasonable. And so trying to get that enforcement to go through, couldn't get someone to escort the record company. And, I understand the sheriff's perspective. He basically doesn't want to push in on someone else's own property, have a shootout, and probably have some version of a disaster. Obviously been picked up on different things for a gun charge, I believe. And, we had the one thing for the death threats against me, which is, the people versus Ricky Hobby type of thing. And, but nothing big has come of all those. There was a big thing recently with hearing a bit through the grapevine, but he had shot either a dog or at someone or something like that, beat someone out there, got a police call. They went out there. I know I got reports from multiple people about a lot of police cars being out there and that type of thing. But the woman ended up retracting her accusation, so nothing came of that either. So it ends up being this, just kind of this tied up mess. And so I get like the Covingtons, various Covingtons, I get their frustrations over the situation. I don't have a great way to resolve it. If I had a police department, then I would send them in. I've had those conversations with Hobby, gave him way more than enough time and leniency and agreements that he's violated and all of that type of thing. But I'm also not in charge of the police force. I don't have a police force. I don't have a military. I don't have a paramilitary force. So none of those in particular. And obviously, establishing any of those types of things is quite a legal and financial process, and so we don't have that. And so it ends up being, kind of stuck in a weird way. And so, calling me a loser and all the stuff that was happening on Facebook is just something you can expect in the political role. And people are nuts, people are crazy. And so, there's no good way to resolve it. That was going to be mostly my discussion is like, what then did you want me to do? Did you want me to request the sheriff? Did you want me to request the state police? And I mostly talked to Keith and Deb Covington, but they know I've done all of this. And so, someone has a great solution to the problem, I'd be welcome to hear it. Maybe there's something, a super obvious solution, super easy solution that I'm just completely missing, but I highly doubt it. So if anyone wants to, have some of these talks, they're welcome to it. I had a good conversation with Amy. She's very reasonable. She's in a bad place. Largely her and the kids being out there is why I've pressed on the issue and tried to get it resolved. And try to, resolve it in multiple different ways now, because there's a straight enforcement way, which I think probably the county and state levels were going to back out of it. Maybe at any point, maybe if I rolled on it super hard, I came in and like, well, let's just roll on this and have the shootout. Maybe they would have, but it seems unlikely. Otherwise, it seems like they would also do it now. And so I've taken multiple different paths to try to resolve the situation, but don't have a great way to resolve it. So if anyone has any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns, they can obviously post a bunch of useful or useless stuff on Twitter or Facebook or whatever all the keyboard trolls and keyboard warriors do, as is natural in our society. They can talk to me directly. We can have, meetings on it, whatever people want to hash out the stuff. So otherwise, this is Jeff Martin signing off until the next disaster, which will be later today because that's about how long it takes.